Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me, which I won't be able to find out before I check the actual live stream myself, because I haven't seen any comments or remarks yet. And someone told me to turn on the comments, which I thought I did. Yeah, chat is disabled. I knew it was a bad idea to do this all on one computer. Interesting. YouTube won't let me turn on the comments. Are the comments working now? Okay, comments are working, that's good. Not seeing any yet, but I'll check in a bit. Welcome to Lightpainting Cars, the webinar. As I predicted, some people actually turned up physically here at Lamborghini Brussels. We have two surprise guests here. I won't show them because they're joining the webinar live, basically. We're here in the workshop at Lamborghini Brussels. It's very dark, as you can see. I have two big lights here, so you can still see me. I'm gonna try as good as I can to show the movements that I'm doing, because it's gonna be hard in the dark, of course. I have a few aids for that. I have this miniature Lego Lamborghini Sian, which I will be using for visualization purposes. And I also brought Obi-Wan Kenobi, who has a lightsaber, and he will be the miniature model, basically showing movements of the LED lightsaber, I suppose. Let's go to my slides. I kept the slides for tonight to a bare minimum, because it's obviously going to be a very practical webinar. We're gonna start off with some information about me, of course. I'm going to switch the stream to the screen with video. There we go. Hi, I'm Rudolf. I'm a 35-year-old photographer, Belgium-based. I used to be Brussels-based, but I'm based in Ghent now. And I've been shooting cars for 3 or 4 years now, I think. And for the last 2 years, I've decided to specifically stick to light painting for several reasons. We'll get to those later, but the biggest reason, I suppose, is because I love doing it. It's a lot of fun. It gives great flexibility as well. And yeah, I've discovered that you can really do almost everything with light painting in terms of commercial car photography. There's a few limitations, but in general it works really well. So you can find me on Instagram, RudolfVDV. You can find me on Behance, behance.net/Rudolf van der Ven. and then my website, of course, rudolfvanderven.com. A major thanks to Lamborghini Brussels for hosting this event. You can find them on Instagram, Lamborghini_Brussels. They have a really nice showroom, first off, but also this really big workshop, which is perfect for light painting because it gets really dark here, and of course you do need darkness for light painting. I'm gonna check the comments in the meantime to see if there's any remarks regarding sound quality. Okay, good. I see everyone seems to be working for everyone. Wow, didn't see that one coming actually. I just saw someone say where I can get my hands on a lightsaber. We'll get to that as well. So major thanks to Lamborghini Brussels, to Darren. Darren's not around. He's the well, he is around, but he's working in the back. He might make a little cameo surprise. I see him coming here. Is he gonna come in the video? Let me introduce you, Darren. So this guy is Darren. You can find him on Instagram as well. Darren__MM, I think.
Double underscore.
Double underscore, yeah. Darren is the marketing manager not just for Lamborghini in Brussels, but also for Bugatti and Bentley as well.
Yes, indeed.
Best marketing manager I know. And I owe like half my career to this guy at least. He's the best. So
sure.
Thank you so much.
You deserve it.
Yeah, not really.
Enjoy it.
See you later. So that was Darren. So thanks to them. Let's go over the content of the webinar in a nutshell. By the way, to my two guests, the video of the webinar afterwards will be sent to you as well. So if you want to see the details, for example, that you cannot see now, you will see it, and that goes for all of you. So everyone who has registered will receive the playback of the video, and of course it'll stay on YouTube as well. So a bit of background on light painting I'll go through. We'll go through the gear I use and the settings I use. We're going to do 2 shots because we're not limited in time, but if we do more than 2, it's going to be you know, like a 2.5, 3 hour webinar, which is, you know, no one's going to have the patience for that. I'm sure some are going to have it, but I don't. And then we're going to go through the stacking. So basically I select certain shots and I stack them in Photoshop, which is how you make most of your shots look good, and it's also easy to clean up your shots like that. And then we're going to do some proper post-processing. As most of you know, I add a sort of studio environment in my in my photos, which makes it all cleaner and yeah. Of course, I'm doing this webinar to promote my online course, which is Lightpainting Cars. There's a bit of the delay in the launch date. It used to be October 2, which is next Saturday, but for several reasons, the main one being the COVID regulations being lifted in Belgium. I was basically suddenly drowning in work, and there was a bit of a pushback there, so I've delayed it by 2 weeks to just make sure that it's absolutely the way I want it to be. Apologies for that. I know some of you have pre-ordered and are still waiting. The launch price will be 149 euros, but for all of you here at the webinar, it's going to be only 119 euros until midnight. If you decide to pre-order, it's still a pre-order. But that's not all. I'm also giving you free access to, I call it group review, and it basically means that every 2 weeks you can always send your light painting results to me. And every 2 weeks I will do a live video stream where I comment on those results, where other people can join in as well, give their feedback, etc. So it's basically a group feedback session, which I'll throw in there for free because 1, I love doing it, and 2, I really appreciate you guys being here, obviously. Which brings me to the point, thank you for being here. I realized that because of if you hear that sound, it's a compressor here in the workshop. We cannot turn it off. Because of the technical issues we had at the beginning, I completely forgot to thank you all. So thank you so much for joining. It means a lot to me. So if you want to decide to pre-order tonight, you can do that on lightpaintingcars.thinkific.com. Thinkific is the e-learning platform that I've been hosting the course on, which so far works really well. I'm really curious to hear from you guys if you've ever used it before, or what do you think of it, of Thinkific. But we'll get back to the course later. So a bit of background on light painting. Like I said, I've been doing it for a little over 2 years, I think. This shot is a Range Rover Sport SVR, a car that I once got to borrow from Land Rover Benelux. If you guys are watching, thanks again for that car. Up till that point, I had always been using flashes and the more traditional sort of lighting techniques, and then combining them all, and it worked out okay, but I hated flashes. One thing that's going to come back like a lot in the course is how much I hate flashes, for several reasons, but we won't get into that tonight. And at some point I found out about a few guys that were light painting cars, and I thought that's really interesting because you can basically create any light shape that you like, and it's a lot cheaper than a full studio setup. Obviously, you really don't need a lot of equipment for it, and it just, you can do it wherever. You can basically go on holidays with just one LED bar, and that's all the equipment you need apart from a camera and a tripod, obviously. So that's how I got into it. I got this as a first result, and I mean, right now I see a million mistakes, but back in the day that was really like, wow, this is probably the kind of photography I want to keep doing. And pretty much from that point on, I said, okay, I'm going to stick to only light painting, and haven't regretted it. It has its limitations. Mainly, of course, you need very dark spots, which is not always easy, especially in summer, because it gets dark relatively late. It's getting a bit better now, but at least here in Belgium. So that's a bit the background on how I got started on light painting. It's not the most interesting story in the world. Gear and settings. I put a picture in there of a full studio equipment setup, just to make a point that you don't need all this stuff. All you need is a light. Let me grab it. This is my trusted little light. I've had it for almost 2 years now. This is a Godox LC500. They used to be a bit more expensive, but you can pick them up for I think 120 or 130 euros now. And even then, it's one of the more expensive ones. You can, I've looked on Amazon, and you can get them for 40, 50 euros if you want to. So it's really affordable compared to professional flashes and all these things. The only thing it needs to do is it needs to be long enough, and it needs to have a certain brightness, but it's not too bad. Like, you really don't need construction light levels, for example. This one has 2 light modes. It has a very cold light. I think it's 5600 Kelvin. You probably can't see anything if I do that. And then it switches modes, and you can switch to 3300 Kelvin. I never use the warm light. I always use the cold light. And you might have noticed that I've added a little extension. Basically, I've duct taped it to a broomstick. That's literally what I've done. But I'll get into that, why I did that in a bit as well. Then, of course, I have a camera. I have a pretty old camera. It's a Canon 5D Mark III. I think it's about 12 years old now. Built like a tank, still love it. Don't really have any reasons to upgrade, because light painting, unlike other forms of photography, doesn't really depend that much on autofocus or the typical technological things that advance rapidly in recent years. It just does what it has to do, and I love it. I probably, if I got a new camera for free, I probably still wouldn't switch. I would still stick to this one. My lens is it's a bit of an overkill lens, I suppose. It's a Canon 50mm 1.2L, which is a pretty expensive L lens. I once got a really good deal on it, but you can probably get 99% of the same result with a Canon 50mm 1.8, which is about 100 euros, I think. To me, the focal length is important. I used to shoot a lot more with my wide angle, which I have somewhere here as well, my 16-35. yeah, even at 35 millimeter, you still see a lot of how do you call it? There's a term for it. Basically, it makes the car look bloated because you don't you shoot with a focal length that's a bit too close. Whereas with a 50 millimeter, you're pretty much shooting at an angle of view that's similar to the human eye. So the car looks very natural. You don't have that sort of wide angle bloaty feeling. I think it's barrel effect. So yeah, 50 millimeter is my usually my go-to lens in 95% of the cases, unless there's no space. For example, a very tight showroom, and it's been doing great things for me. I love this lens as well, but like I said, it's a bit overkill. My tripod, well, I can get into tripods for hours, but I won't because I want to keep this a pretty short seminar. It's this Manfrotto Be-Free Carbon Edition. It has some positive points. For example, it's very light, it's very small if you pack it up, so you can easily throw it in a suitcase. What's bad about it is this is my third ball hat, I think, and it's broken again, so it's something snapped in here, like the spring or something, and it doesn't keep the camera very straight, which means that in between shots I usually see a few millimeters of difference in, like, the car is a bit angled or the picture was a bit lower than the previous shot, which of course is very annoying. I must say I'm not too big of a fan of Manfrotto after a couple of years now. Like I said, it's my third ball head, but apart from that, I guess it's a nice tripod. That's it about gear, actually. Like I said, it's a very short list. There's a small few details, like for example, I have a polarizer filter on here, which is not, it doesn't do much with light painting, and even on the contrary, sometimes it can work a bit against you because you don't get the reflections from the light that you like. But it does come in handy when you have an environment with some smaller lights here and there, and it cuts out those tiny little reflections. I'm gonna check the comments again to make sure the stream is still working. Lens distortion, thank you, Stefan. So yeah, by the way, 51 people, wow, I'm really happy to see that, thanks guys. So yeah, polarizer is not necessary for light painting, but in some situations with those small reflections it definitely helps. This one's pretty beat up, but it still works. So that's it in terms of gear. I have two other lights, the ones that are shining at my face right now, which are the non-light pavo tubes. I don't use those per se to actually paint the light in light painting, but what I do use them for sometimes is to create color accents in the environment. Some of you may recall, for example, the shots with an Audi RS6 a while ago, the silver one, and the Ferrari SF90, where because they don't have color themselves, it's really nice to add in like some red lighting from the side or something. I love those lights, but they're pretty hard to duct tape to a stick, which is why I don't use them to paint the actual light. Apart from that, brilliant things. Shout out to non-light. So today we're going to be light painting. You probably haven't seen it behind me yet, but this Lamborghini Huracan STO in a very specific color. It's a matte green color, which looks aggressive, but is not necessarily the best color for light painting. And I wanted to be transparent in the sense that we already shot this car before. We shot it a few weeks ago. You can see the pictures on the screen right now, I hope. Yeah, judging by the reactions you can. Thanks, Jens. Basically we've shot it before, which was, in a way, it was good because I know now how the color reacts with light painting. Like I said, it's not a very typical color to light paint. It's matte, it's darker, it's not very reflective, so it can be a bit tricky. So the pictures that we're gonna shoot tonight are going to look more or less like this. It was shot in the same setting here, it's the same car, I'm gonna use the same light. So just so you have an idea. We're gonna start with the side shot, for which I have my Lego Lamborghini Sian here. I'm going to switch the video to full video. There we go. So I hope you guys can see the Lego car a bit like this. Thanks, Darren. Verde turbine, I guess you would say in Italian. So, like I said, this is OB1, or OB1 the light painter. Most people, when they think of light painting, if you're the camera, so the camera is on this side, you would probably light paint from this side, in between the car and the camera. Which makes sense in a lot of ways, because obviously this is the side that you're shooting, so you want to light that side. But there's one big problem with light painting, and I'm sure people who have light painted before have already noticed this. Light painting and walking in front of a car creates very annoying little trail marks, footsteps, which is for me the #1 frustration in light painting, because they're a pain in the ass to get rid of in Photoshop. So it took me a while to come up with a sort of technique. Like, I tried everything. Like, I tried to wear black shoes and black pants, which sort of worked, but you still see some trails. I tried hanging my light from a fishing rod, which absolutely failed, very dangerous as well. Until I got the idea to just simply duct tape my light to a broomstick, which turned out so far the most viable option to be able to not walk in front of the car while I was painting it. So what I do is very simple. Let's say OB1's arm is the broomstick. I just walk on the other side of the car and I light paint it, I don't know if you can see this, over the car. Still lighting that side, but holding the light very far on the broomstick. Very simple solution. Got rid of my problem. Of course, it's not the most flexible solution, because obviously you want some control over where you put your light. So as you'll see later on, what I do nowadays is my first shot is always from the other side of the car, so that I just have this clean shadow part below the car, which is where your footsteps would be. And afterwards I add layers of light painting that I did shoot from this side of this car, where I have more control over where I keep the light over the shoulder, and I just merge the two, so I have my clean little shadow and my perfect light paint lines, basically. That's all there is to it. If you're not quite following right now and you're a bit confused, don't worry, you'll see what it does later. So I suggest that I'm going to flip up my camera. It's a bit warm here, sorry, got a bit of a tomato hat going on. Let's see. So let's start by, I'm not sure you can see the car in the distance, probably not, so I'll maybe add one light. That's still pretty dark, so maybe I'll, I guess you can sort of see it. What do the comments say? Yeah, Darren might recall that time where we light painted a Bugatti Chiron, and it's a funny little story, and I probably shouldn't tell this, but the underside of my light has a mounting point for a tripod, and before using the broomstick, I actually thought I would screw a tripod into the light and light paint the Bugatti that way. Unfortunately, that connection point failed pretty soon, and I was just in time to swipe away my tripod and light, which I was holding over a $2.5 million Bugatti. Sorry for that, Darren, but it worked out okay. All right, so if anyone has trouble seeing it, yeah, because on my screen it looks pretty bright, but I don't know if you guys have like less bright screens or something. One point of reference for positioning your camera height-wise is actually quite easy, and I did get this idea from the Lamborghini style guide, actually, coincidentally. The height of my camera is always level with the bottom of the windshield, so basically I'll point it out on the small Lamborghini. This point here, this height is where I typically position my camera. Which in this case is going to be something like this. I don't know if you can see the camera. Maybe I should move the other light here as well. I did an earlier test wearing AirPods, which failed miserably for the live stream. So in one way it would be convenient, in another way I'm just a little bit scared of ruining the live stream. Yeah, it's a Godox LC500. I haven't discussed settings yet. I've only talked about gear. I always start with one setting, and I see from there if I have to adjust it. And that setting is pretty easy. So obviously I'm shooting in manual on my camera. My aperture, I always start at f8, and I typically keep it there. f8 is like nice in the middle, it's nice and sharp, no depth of field issues or focus issues. My shutter time is, I always start out with 4 seconds. If it's a bit too dark, I make it longer. If it's a bit too light, I make it shorter. But especially for exterior shots, 4 seconds is typically the sweet spot. And then my ISO, I keep it as low as possible, which in my case is 100. If your camera goes lower, you can go lower, but then of course you have to compensate with a slightly longer shutter time. And then there's also the self-timer that I use. Some of you might have seen me light paint and know what it's for, others have no idea why. Basically it means that the camera counts down for 10 seconds and then takes the photo, which gives me time to walk over to the car, and then as soon as it clicks I start light painting. So 4 seconds shutter time, f8 aperture, and ISO 100 plus the self-timer. I'm going to try to position my camera a bit in the middle of the car now. I guess most of you will realize why I'm putting the light next to the car. It's so I can focus on the car. So my camera is set up now. I'm going to start, like I said, with the shot on the broomstick on this side of the car. So I'm going to be standing behind the car like this. And oops, there goes the shoulder. And painting this car, this side of the car with the broomstick. I hope you can see my light move at least. It's gonna be hard to show you. I guess I can show you just once with the lights on. I don't know where I put my lights. So I'll walk over now and I hope you'll see. Did everyone see that, or do I need to add more lights? Okay. Good. All right. So I'll do my shot. Going to turn this one off and this one off, so it's going to be dark as hell. Sorry for the compressor. So I'm hitting the shutter button now, and that'll give me 10 seconds to walk over, and in those 10 seconds, as soon as they're over, I'm going to move the light like I just did, and I'm going to time it just about right to get it in those 4 seconds of shutter time over the car. So let's go. Might have been a bit too slow there. Yeah, slightly too slow. I'm also going to turn on the lights of the car, which always gives a bit of a nicer effect. Especially the rear lights. That was quite a bit better. I'm not tethering because it would definitely add an unnecessary layer of complexity, but you'll see the results later anyway when I edit them in Lightroom. So you can tell that we have a very clean shadow and the lines are quite clear as well. Unfortunately, we have that annoying line in the back. Annoying light in the back, the yellow, but we'll get rid of that, no problem. And usually if you pick a pretty sweet dark spot, it won't be much of an issue. So for a side shot, that's already not bad, but I am going to try a few other shots, this time from this side of the car, because now that I have the clean shadow in the camera, I can start doing the actual painting of the car with a bit more control. So let's try how that goes. Bram, yes, you have a point with the remote shutter, but at the same time, I don't know, like the distance that you walk is usually it's around those 10 seconds. But of course you do have the advantage of not having to walk back and forth all the time. If you do it with a phone app, yeah, I suppose it could be nice to see the results on your phone as well. I guess I'm just too bit of an old fart to keep working this way. Let's see what the others say. Yeah, I suppose. I guess this is becoming an interesting light painting think tank at the same time. Good ideas. Alright, let's do another one, but this one from this side of the car. So this is most definitely a brighter lit shot. It's going to be a bit hard to see again. We'll see it more in detail in a bit. Essentially these two shots that I just took are, at least for the side shots, are my main shots that I take. I'm going to turn my light on again for a little while. Like I said, all we need is a clean shadow, which is very hard with footsteps, and a nice light painted side, basically, where your details are visible. You'll see in a bit that because when I took that front shot, I'm a little bit further away from the car, like the light is more from the side than from the top. And it also depends on what kind of look you're going for, because for example, the first shot you can see it's it's a very stylistic shot. Like you only see like the shoulder lines, which can be nice, but you're missing a lot of detail, because in this one you can probably already see more detail in the wheels, in the underside of the car. So if you find a nice balance between the two, which is what we're going to do later, we're going to add them on top of each other in Photoshop. We can typically find a good look in between a very stylistic shot, but still add some details into it. I think we have enough for the side shot already. I think a lot of you will be going, okay, what? This was it? Yeah, this was it. This is what the time it takes for most of my side shot photos, so it goes pretty fast. The first one, like I mentioned earlier, I turned on the lights of the car, which is always a nice detail. No matter what angle you're shooting from, it can be a bit tricky with headlights because they tend to be too bright. So what I do sometimes when I'm shooting headlights and when I'm shooting them from the front, I take a very short shutter time photo to make them a lot darker and less, not blowing out the image. And then I add that shot on top of my other shots, which are regularly light painted, but with the lights off. I can show you some details of that later as well. Jarno, the exposure was 4 seconds. Yeah, 4 seconds is typically what does it for me. A very big part of light painting is the color science. If you take a bright yellow car, for example, there's like a Huracan Evo, bright yellow here in the back, which is extremely easy to light paint, but because it's so bright, you need to cut down on your shutter time, which means that you almost have to run from one side to the other, because your shutter is getting down to like 2.5, 3 seconds, which can be stressful, especially with more expensive cars, because you're still waving around a light bar basically. On the other hand, if you take a very dark car, you're probably going to have to up your shutter time to 6, sometimes 8 seconds to make it visible. So yeah, in the course there's a huge portion dedicated to the colors of cars, because for example, blue cars, a lot of people think, oh, blue, it's pretty bright, it's like red, so it's going to be very poppy in your image, which it absolutely isn't. Blue, there's a long scientific explanation, but blue is a color that's less well recepted, I guess, by the receptors in your eyes compared to red and green. So it makes the contrast between blue and black a lot smaller, unfortunately, because I like blue as a color, but it can be a bit of a pain in the ass for light painting. This color, obviously, that we're shooting now is a tricky one. It's in a way, it's less light painting, and it's more like highlighting the contours of the car in this case, because there's very little light reflecting off it, but at the same time it makes it look pretty badass that way as well. I really like the shots that we did of this car previously as well. It has this aggressive Batmobile kind of vibe going on. So that's it for shooting the side shot. I'm not sure if there's any other questions. Isn't it possible to lower the percent of brightness on your light instead of speeding up shutter? That is a very good point. I suppose you could do that. I rarely mess with the brightness of my light. Sometimes a bit for detail shots, because we're going to do a detail shot in a bit, and detail shots are a bit tricky because you definitely need a less long exposure, because you're closer to the car and there's more light somehow reflecting it. Let's see. I have once recolored a vehicle, but that was for completely different reasons. It was because we needed a Bentley Brussels, which is right next door, needed 3 shots matching the Belgian tricolor, the flag, for the national holiday. And we had a black car and we had a yellow car, which was the Bacalao. But we didn't have a red car, so we took a shot of Flying Spur, which was grey, and then we added a red layer to it. So I did recolor it, but not for the reasons you mentioned. Elmar, you asked which lens we need for that. I mentioned earlier. Sorry. I mentioned earlier that for me the 50mm really works. It's in a lot of ways it's the perfect lens, focal length wise. And now it depends a bit on which brand of camera you're shooting. If it's Canon, the 50mm 1.8 is a great lens. It'll it'll do everything you need it for and more. It's about €100. I don't know where you're from, but yeah, it'll do for sure. Darren, I don't know what's your fault. Oh yeah, the red Bentley. Yeah, true. Matthias, this Godox can't, but there is an RGB version. I think it's called the Godox LC500R. Don't take my word for it, but it's something like that. There's a colored version. To be honest, I love my NOM lights, which are colored lights. This one isn't the LC500, it's just white. Colors can be nice to add an accent, but for light painting, I have tried a few times to actually use a colored light over a car, but it typically ruins the picture because you're mixing and matching colors, like the color of the car, and you're adding another color on top. So yes, I do manual focus, indeed. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Autofocus sometimes works if you put your light very close to the car, but manual is usually the way to go. Do you light paint with only white, or can you use colored lights? And if so, yeah. So that's that's what I said earlier, is that I recommend only using white for the actual light painting. You can use colored lights, but I recommend you only do it as sort of environmental sort of accent lights, I suppose, to give some color. I'll show a few pictures later where I did it, which can enhance a picture, but to actually light paint with a color, no, I definitely don't recommend it. I think I saw a question about Bram said, do you usually use a base layer with ambient lighting of your background before adding all of your light painting layers, or do you light your background separately? We'll get into that in a bit in the post-processing, but what I typically do is I separate my car from my background layer by masking, of course, and then on top of the background layer I'll add some gradients to still have the shadow and the light fall off below the car to make it look natural. I typically never mess with the car itself. I leave that, and apart from retouching and cleaning it up a little. But everything happens between the layer of the car and the background layer, if that makes sense. But we'll get into it later. Do you use any peaking while setting using manual focus? Yes, all the time. I zoom peak for most shots, typically on like a door handle or something. Yeah, that's, for me, it's typically the easiest way to get a sharp focus. Stefan says, do you usually follow the same steps in order not to forget certain areas, making it a consistent process except for the most exotic body types? I should. Not really. To be honest, creating the course helped me a little bit in that sense, because I've worked on some cheat sheets of, you probably saw it in the cheat sheet that came with the webinar invitation, where I listed the shots that I would take, which is not anywhere near the shots that we took today of the side shot, because for some reason here we only needed two, one with the lights on and the foreground, painting from the back and painting from the front, basically. And I think that's about it for questions. So we'll continue with a detailed shot. I am gonna have to move the car a little bit for that, because I want you guys to be closer so you can see what I'm doing. So pardon me for the noise. It's gonna get a bit noisy in here. Okay, how visible is the car? Not very visible, it seems. For the detail shots, let me switch to screen view. I wanted to replicate this shot that we did last time. It's not an easy one because obviously the car's color is already quite dark and the STO sticker is not sticking out as much. But I still think it's a really nice angle. It has that aggressiveness. It still has a bit of that pattern on the left, that jagged edge kind of thing. I'm loving your comments here. Sorry, Darren. 56 people, by the way. Really cool. So let's try to replicate that shot. I'm going to see how much of that you can see right now. Yeah, I guess you can see it somewhat. Will you be light painting a glossy car as well? More specific to see how you handle the reflections on the light of the bodywork. Matte paint disguises a lot. That's a good point. We haven't foreseen it, but we will be light painting some cars afterwards, which I unfortunately can't show just quite yet because there's a rather special one here in the showroom, very exclusive, and Darren will kill me if we show that one. But I will record it and I will make sure to post that on the YouTube channel and send you guys the link afterwards, because you have a fair point. Matte paint does hide a lot of the mistakes that you can make in terms of reflections, so note taken. And here's Darren. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I don't tell anyone about the special cars here. But if you
I
want the other ones, I can bring you the other one.
I think in terms of timing it's going to be, because we're already at 9:15, we can see after, maybe. So I'm just going to use the same position, more or less, that was in the shot. Envy Productions, nice try. So same principle here, use focus peaking to focus on, in this case, the STO sticker. I'm shooting it from, I might turn it a bit lower. I think it's nice when you're looking up. Basically, details, I mentioned this earlier, detail shots are a bit trickier because you're closer to the car, and typically the light, I'm not a light scientist, but you have more light in your picture because there's the surface where it bounces to is closer to the camera than, for example, the shot that we just did. So in a way, we need to compensate for that. I suppose, like some of you said, yes, you could tone down your light. What I typically do is just shortening my shutter time to 2.5 seconds, which is, in my experience, the best kind of exposure for these shots. It also makes it easy because you're standing close to the car, so you can just do this basically, which I will demonstrate in a bit. Something that's really nice for detail shots is counter lighting. Basically, moving the light behind your subject, or like slightly in the distance on your left or on your right. But there's a tricky side to that because it means that in a lot of your shots you're going to actually see the trail of your light. which you will then have to remove in post-production. Now, in some shots that's easy. In some shots it means that your reflection of your light is all over your bodywork, or if you, for example, take a picture of a rear spoiler, it can be quite tricky as well, because you have all those little corners in that spoiler that are reflecting that light. It's hard to explain. So what I typically do for a detail, if I'm backlighting, I try to find a balance where I still have that nice little fuzzy effect in the distance, which I believe, yeah, I guess the picture I showed earlier doesn't really have that, but I'll show you guys some examples of pictures where it is, yeah, you see that haziness in the distance basically. But at the same time, I don't want the light to be in that picture, so I try to find that balance. In this case, it's a relatively straightforward shot. I think you can all see, Darren is moving cars again. I think you can all see the setup of the camera and how similar it is to that shot that I just showed. So I'm just going to give it a quick swipe and see how it comes out. I'm going to turn off this light and make sure it doesn't fall. I see we have some light connoisseurs in the house. Alright, I'm going to turn this one off as well. Focus. One of the biggest headaches with light painting, in my experience at least, is holding your light towards the car while trying to focus and messing with your camera. It's a nightmare. I definitely need to hire an assistant. I'm going to turn off this light as well. No, he's not moving a cyan. It's definitely not a cyan. Okay, let's go for it. I've set my shutter time to 2.5 seconds, and I've also changed my self timer from 10 seconds to 2 seconds, because I'm obviously standing right next to the camera, so I don't need 10 seconds to walk over. So let's see how it goes. Okay, that went well. I think Darren is bringing over the yellow Hurricane. So I took 2 shots. First one was a bit too bright, like my light was clearly too close to the car, and the second one is a bit nicer, but it has the STO sticker is popping out, isn't popping out as much. So we might have to do a bit of a mix of both. I think that could be nice. I definitely like the aesthetics of the second shot better. And the only thing I did to make it a bit darker was keep my lights a bit higher and more distant from the car. So that came out pretty nicely. I know it's hard to see on an LCD through a webcam, through a streaming server. I suggest we already have a look at these results. I'm going to put away my cyan and plug in my card reader. Which is also a good opportunity to look at comments. lights again. I love how everyone is just here for the Lamborghini sounds. None of you care about light painting. Let's see. Bear with me while I import my pictures. It's amazing, we've only taken 5 pictures today. Tom, it's a 50, so 50. To light paint a whole car, everything it takes time. What's the longest time you have already light painted a car? The longest is 13 seconds. Let me share my screen. I did it for the mini Paddy Hopkirk edition. It's a photo shoot that's out of my Behance. And it was actually, I don't know if you guys can see it, but it was this shot, which turned out nicely. I have told myself after that I should do it more often to light paint at a longer exposure. But I think my style just kind of naturally progressed towards a more dark look and feel. But I probably should do it more often as well. Yeah. Joren, no, I've never used the saltbox on cars. I've used them on people, of course. But I think when I think of what's the other photography technique again? There's a very popular branch of automotive photography with softboxes, where you use like a very quick shutter to just get the highlight details. I think it's my LED bar is yes, it's on maximum power. This is the look. I forgot what name it is, but it's a very nice style as well, and I think this is all done by yeah, with a large octagon, octabox, or FDL. Thank you, Jasper. Yes, focused lighting. Yeah, very nice as well. But I don't like I said, I light paint because I love focus diffuse lighting. Yeah, Sarah. The thing about light painting is that you only need that LED bar, and you can travel across the world, in a way of saying it, and just do everything with your one LED bar, as opposed to having a full setup of lights and softboxes. And I know you can fold softboxes, but you need a flash again, and tripods and all that. So, or C-stands. So I really do like the flexibility of light painting, and I think with light painting you can, to a certain extent, mimic a lot of those effects as well, which is it's very flexible. Never tried LED tiles. I'd be curious to actually. That could be fun. Yep. Is everyone seeing my screen in the meantime? I suppose so. See no replies, but in the meantime, I'll just I'll go through the shots. Like I said, my tripod is very annoying because you tend to have motion in between your different exposures, which is quite evident when you're switching between this one and that one. Which is, it's quite a distance lower than the previous shot, but no problem there, we can fix that. What I always do, first off, I go to develop before I go into Photoshop. By the way, this is Lightroom, in case you guys didn't know. I suppose most of you have worked with Lightroom before. Nope. If my tripod was more sturdy, I probably would, to minimize it. But because it's already a complete mess for the moment, I just I fix it in post. I know it's bad because everything you can shoot decent in camera is better than doing it in post. But I just haven't looked into replacing my ball head for the 4th time yet. What I did used to do is in the center column of the tripod, my old one had a hook there, and I would sometimes just hang. What was it again? It was like a, oh yeah, I had like a lens pouch where I would put some stuff in so that it would keep it down. Yeah, not a Countach. I wouldn't be here if it was a Countach. Well, I would be, but I would be crying and screaming. So yeah, no real stabilization at this point. So what we're gonna do here, oh yeah, so what I did was in develop, I always, well, I do remove chromatic aberration anyway because it doesn't happen that often, but you know, might as well be safe. So that's here in the lens correction part, pretty much near the bottom. And then the most important thing is the enable profile corrections. What it does is it has a database of all known lenses, and it recognizes it automatically if you have a Canon lens, and in most cases also other brands like Sigma. Nope, not an LM002 either. So when you enable profile corrections, you can see that it does 2 things. One, it corrects the geometry of the image, so it unbarrels it a little bit. As soon as I tick this box, the view becomes straighter. I don't know how else to say it, but it corrects the shortcomings of the lens, the natural shortcomings. And what it also does, it removes the vignette. So the vignette is the very light in this case because our aperture is quite small, but you have like a sort of shadow around the edges of the lens, which is a natural phenomenon. It's almost impossible to get rid of it except for Zeiss, but you know, who can afford Zeiss? Not a Centenario either. I love the guessing. So when I tick the enable profile corrections, it counters the vignette effect as well. So by doing these 2 steps, these 2 ticks, you're basically making your picture as perfect as it can be. Stupid way of saying it, but it's you counter the natural effects of the lens, basically. I'm gonna delete this first shot because this was the one where I wasn't fast enough to get through the whole car. So I'm gonna remove it from Lightroom. So this was that first shot I did from behind the car. And this is that second shot. Now you can see there's a lot more detail in it. You have the wheels, you have the logo that's popping out way more. I hope the resolution of my screen is high enough on the stream. So overall, you see more of the car. But as I mentioned before, here are our dreaded footsteps. That's all my feet walking in front of the car. Extremely hard to get rid of in Photoshop. In this case, it probably wouldn't be too hard, but it was still take some time, because you can bet that the content-aware fill of Photoshop is not going to do a great job here. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine these two images, which means selecting them both, and then right-click them, edit in, and then open as layers in Photoshop. And now we wait for 10 minutes because my laptop is having a pretty hard time with the stream. Seriously guys, I'm just gonna rename this live stream to Lamborghini Brussels. Could it be that Darren is actually going to reveal which car it is? It's hard to imagine. Alright, so Photoshop is done. I could use another Coke actually, thank you. So here we have two layers now. The top layer, this one, is the first shot, the much more moody one. And the bottom layer is the one with more detail in. So what we're going to do first is we're going to align those layers so that at least our car is in the same position rather than, 20 centimeters higher. I'm going to make this layer a bit transparent, which makes it easier to see what the difference is. And what I always try, Photoshop has these automatic, just realized I'm in the dark here, I should probably turn on a light. Photoshop has an automatic way of aligning layers, but it doesn't always work as well. Sometimes it really messes it up. This is very bright. So my preferred way to always check to align is basically turning down the opacity and manually moving them over each other and seeing how that works out. Now, if one of the images is rotated a bit combined as opposed to the other one, it makes it hard, but it looks like here the alignment is quite straight and I can just move it down and they overlap. I don't know how precise that is. Yeah, there's still a bit of a difference in there. I'm going to select both layers and just see what it gives when I do edit and auto align layers. See a lot of movement there. No, that definitely didn't work. So I'm going to go back to what I did earlier, and I think that worked out better. Thank you very much. Darren, everybody, my great assistant.
Guys, hint 1. It's a modern car. Hint 2. It's a modern car. And hint 3. It's a limited version of a limited version. Bye.
That should give you plenty of hints, really. That last one was a very good hint.
I know. Thank you. Assistant.
Alright, so here we are back at what I did earlier. So the manual moving the layers over each other and aligning the cars. So I'm okay, some guesses in the chat already. Right now we have these two different exposures lying on top of each other. What I always like to do is I always put the layer that's the lightest on top. So I'm gonna move that one on top, and I'm going to select the lighten layer style here, and then slightly decrease the opacity just to have a bit of that detail seeping through, but still remain, like, keep the mystique and darkness of that darker bottom layer, this one, which we all like. It looks very stylistic, but we're missing detail in that one. So by enabling that slightly lighter layer on top of it, we create a bit of detail. So right now it's at 34% opacity and lighten as the layer style. And yeah, you can see the difference when we enable it and disable it. Now in this case, we want the clean shadow of the bottom layer, this one, where we don't have the footsteps. So that's already easy. We can just mask away the rest of the surroundings of the top layer. But we also have some other stuff to get rid of, namely that big white stripe. Let's do that first. So right now we're gonna just work on that bottom layer, and I'm just going to move my light away because I need some darkness to see this. Okay, I'll make it 35 for Stefan. There we go. No, that's 5. 35. It's my laptop is having a bit of a hard time with the screen, so if Photoshop is a bit sluggish, apologies. People are getting close. What we're gonna do, at least this is how I do it, I select the polygonal lasso tool, so not the regular lasso tool, but the one where you can click, but everyone has his own technique, I suppose. And we're just gonna select around that big white stripe here at the top. I hope you guys can see my cursor, by the way, because sometimes when streaming the cursor disappears, but I think it's quite alright in this case. Correct me if I'm wrong. At least I see a little cursor moving on my screen here. So we're gonna select that big white stripe, and then we're just gonna do content aware fill, and hopefully it's gonna get rid of it. Now in this case it's a bit more complex because we also have that ugly white light in the back of the workshop, which okay, good, cursor is showing, which we're gonna get rid of at the same time. Now imagine we didn't have that white, that yellow light in the back, and just the light of the light painting. Contrary to what you may think, around that white of the light is actually a very faint haze, and you don't really see it unless you look very close, which means that we need to select quite wide around it, because otherwise our content aware fill is going to get confused. So we're going to grab our lasso. We're still working in the bottom layer here, so for those who are having a bit of trouble, like where are we, do we have both layers enabled or just one? No, just one, and it's the darker one. So I'm just going to get that lasso tool and select way around it. Now in this case it's going to get a little bit messed up because of that white light, that yellow light right underneath it, but we'll see how it comes out. And make sure you go way around it to counter for that haze that's inside. And let's just see what happens now if we do. I won't work with shortcuts, I'm just going to show you edit fill, and make sure content is set to content aware. And basically, for those that don't know, Photoshop fills that area with a pattern that it thinks is suitable. In this case, a complete mess. That typically goes a lot better. It's not a problem though, because at least all the brightness is gone, and we are going to add that little studio environment over it. So I just want the background to be dark. It doesn't matter if there's a lot of stuff in there. I'm going to do one more time the same, but with this yellow light. I'm gonna go lasso around it, edit, fill, content aware, Coke. Now you can see Photoshop is doing some weird stuff. It generally never does that. In this case it's really because of that weird yellow light in the back, the one that you can still see in the second layer. So here you can see it added some kind of a wheel or something. It's probably hard to see for those with brightness turned down. Good question by Jarno. Why don't you take another shot without light painting? It's a good point. I typically do that, not just for these reasons, and also most of the time it's not really necessary to be doing this stuff, because it's usually just selecting around your light and editing it out while using the content aware filler. I usually take a shot without light painting for safety, because sometimes the detail gets lost, or you never know if you didn't get one shot where you didn't move your light past a certain point. if that makes sense. So it's always safe to have a non-light painted shot, which is also in my shot list for the course. So that definitely works. But I end up rarely using it because this is almost faster than actually using a separate picture. There's still a bit of strange yellow goo going on here, so I'm just going to grab here the healing brush. I'm going to set it a bit bigger. And just go over this stuff. And by going over the lighter things in the background, you can easily just get rid of those. Same goes for me, because I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm quite visible here in the back. We're going to be masking the car, so it's not going to be much of an issue anyway, but I still want the background as dark as possible so that nothing comes through. Not with a longer exposure actually. I typically do it for 4 seconds as well, just to have the background, because I always end up using the shadow, well, the light fall off shot from the photo that I take from the other side of the car. So I don't really need the foreground to be clean, but it's mostly the background, because that's where you end up moving your light. Good point, Alistair. So yeah, you can choose if you want to take one without light painting, it works, and you'll be safe. If you just want to mess around with your either your healing brush or your content-aware fill, you know, whatever works best for you. For me, it's typically the content-aware fill, unless I really can't get it to work in Photoshop, which is rare. Okay, so this is our that first shot, and right now what I'm going to do is just mask out the car. So to mask, I always use the brightest shot of the car that I have, which in this case is this one. I'm going to temporarily put it back to 100%. And as you can see, like here, the bumper, the front, it's still quite dark, so it can be tricky. So what I typically do is I add a quick adjustment layer with exposure, and I knock up the exposure like pretty extremely so that I have a clear view of what I'm actually masking. If there's some diehard Photoshop aficionados here, you're probably gonna get very angry at me, because even for masking I use the polygonal lasso tool. I don't use the pen tool. I've always hated the pen tool, don't ask me why. Jarno, you'll see what I'll do with the yellow light. It's gonna fade quite nicely with the background if I add the layer on top of it, the background. Probably is my guess. I'm glad to see someone else is using the lasso tool as well. So this is pretty simple. I always typically start next to a wheel and I start going around the edge of the car. The bottom is black, so it can be a bit tough. The wheels are not as important in my experience. I mean, you have to do it properly, but it's so dark down there that most of the time, if you make a little mistake, it's not going to show because it's basically a black puddle. It's already 9:50, guys. I thought this was going to be a 1-hour webinar. Apologies, it's taking a bit longer than expected. Sorry, Darren. We still have a few cars to light paint tonight, so it's going to get late here. Has he revealed already which car? No. I guess this is the most boring part of light painting, masking your car. especially on a laptop that's pretty sluggish because of the live stream. Next webinar, I'm definitely using 2 separate computers. 58 people. Okay, glad to see that half of you hasn't left yet because it got too slow. I might be going a tad faster and less detailed than I usually would. Apologies for that, but I think you all get the point. And of course, for those who are not very fluent in Photoshop, these procedures are textually detailed as well in the course, not just on video, so that you can take your time and figure it out. Basically, if you're not familiar with masking, what we're doing is we're creating a selection around the car and only the car, so not the environment, so that we can easily lift the car out of its environment. And that probably doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but you are going to see what I'm talking about pretty soon. Elmar, I'm using the Kelvin on the light is 5700, I believe. 5600. Like I said, I always, well, pretty much always use the colder light. Actually, now that we're talking about light temperature, I probably should talk a bit about white balance. White balance, in my opinion, is a tricky one with light painting because it really depends on the color of the car. 99% of the times I'll use automatic white balance. Yeah, good point, Jarno. Lambos do have sharp edges, it does make it easier. So I almost always use automatic white balance because I prefer to just edit it in post. I guess that's a bit of the conclusion of tonight, that I like to edit everything in post. But it has backfired from time to time with weird colors, and especially dark colors. Sometimes it can really do freaky things. By the way, I don't know if you can tell the footsteps here, like even in the shadows there's like a white haze in front of it, and of course it's exaggerated because I've turned my exposure all the way up. Alright, I think we have it all now. So now we've made a selection all around the car. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to turn this layer off again. I'm going to get rid of that crazy exposure layer. Oh yeah, I won't do it because I have my selection active. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a separate layer from this one. So basically do a layer via copy. And what it did is it took out the car, and I still have that exact same picture beneath it. But for example, if I turn this one off, you won't see that any difference because it's just the car part that's on top of it. I don't know if you can see that in the stream. And the reason we're doing that is because, like I said earlier, I like to add a little studio environment kind of thing, which is actually quite simple to do. I've struggled quite a bit in the beginning doing it, but then I sort of figured out the way I like it, which is actually really simple. I'm going to turn down the light a little bit because I really need my screen to be dark. What I typically start off with is I select the gradient tool, completely black, so basically black on one side, in this case my foreground color, and on the other side just transparent. And I'll drag it. I'm just going to create a layer between the background and the car, and I'll drag it. Okay, if I'm being a bit nitpicky, I see that my car is not 100% straight, but for this viewing it doesn't really matter. I'm going to just drag that gradient this way. Now that already darkens our foreground color, quite well, our foreground itself basically, which already makes the picture a bit more mystique-y. And then I'll do the same but from the top, and from the top I'll usually go a bit further. So I still have my black selected, and I start about at the top of the car, and then I go about here, I think. And you can already tell, like, wow, boom, our image is in a lot of ways already isolated. We don't have the I was gonna say ugly environment. I didn't mean that, Darren. It's a very nice environment, but it's a lot cleaner in the shot now. But it's a bit too dark in this sense. By the way, I don't know who said it about the orange light, but yeah, we're gonna have to get rid of it because it's just at that point where there's no black gradient overlaying it. So let's quickly turn off our gradients again, go back to our original picture. And let's see. I guess, yeah, it's not in where our car is selected, so I'm just going to select this part, and fingers crossed that this might work if I just do a content aware fill. It did, kind of. It's hard to see here. I think there's a bit of striping, but yeah, we can always get rid of that later. Turn the car back on. So the reason why we took out the car is because we need the car to be on top of those background gradients, because if I would turn off this car layer now, you can see that we drew over the original picture, and by doing that we also pretty much deleted our car almost entirely. So we'll turn the car back on, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm already quite liking this image. One disadvantage of having your car's lights on is, like you see here, we have that license plate kind of reflection light hitting the ground floor, which I will also get rid of. I'm just going to turn off my things again. Yeah, I guess it's a bit of a tough one. I suppose if I just paint it for now. Again, I'm not, like, normally I can easily spend a couple of hours on a few photos, but we don't have the time for that, so I'm just gonna go for a quick solution. Hard to see on my screen, but I think that kind of did the trick. I just painted a semi-transparent black layer on top of it. Now what I like to do in that studio environment kind of thing, I'm going to go back to the original shots, and it might be a bit hard to tell. Okay, here the backgrounds are a bit lighter, it's more like a dark bluish, but actually I didn't do it here, surprisingly. A lot of my shots, what I do is on top of those gradients that I created in the background, I create a new layer, and I will go for a very blurry sort of fade in the same color as the car. So I've created a new layer. I'm going to go to a lighter part of the car here, which is sort of this light army gray bluey-ish. And I'm going to select a color, and here I have a round marquee tool, the elliptical one, and I'm just going to sort of create a circle here, and it looks a bit James Bondsy like this, actually not bad either. But I'm going to blur that circle, so we're gonna do filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and blur it quite a bit, like it's always, you know, for Stefan I'll put it on a round number, 500. It might have been a bit too much, might have gone over the edges here. No, actually, good. And then I just fiddle a little bit with it, and I tend to sort of like mimic the shape of the car. Like not entirely, but it's sort of like the that blur kind of fade thing is transmitted by the car onto its background. Maybe rotate a little bit. Yeah. And of course now it looks weird because it's popping from beneath the car as well, which makes it look very strange because the wheels are dark and they're surrounded by something light. So what we'll do is we'll create a new layer mask, revealing everything, and then we're gonna mask out the bottom portion. So you can see here that we created a mask here, which currently it shows everything of that layer, but now we're gonna drag a black gradient from the bottom to the top, which is going to give us a bit more this look. Now, I think it should be a little bit wider, so I'm going to sort of stress it a little bit like that. And it might already... Why a blur with all that fuzz if you could do a radial gradient on the background? Wouldn't that be easier? Yes, but the downside for me of a radial gradient is that it has less flexibility. Like you draw it and then it becomes a bit more annoying to transform it, which might... Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's similar, but in my experience, I just like it when I have a shape that I can just drag and rotate and stuff. But I guess it does work for a radial blur as well. It just depends a little bit on your personal preference. Yeah. So I'm gonna move that blurry thing a little bit more down as well. One thing to always check really well is your shadows here. I've had it more than once that I didn't really inspect them, and then the problem is when you upload something to social media, you have compression, and because of JPEG artifact and stuff, you can sometimes notice things more in the shadow that you wouldn't on a regular working document in Photoshop, for example. So I've had these things where the wheels were actually a bit lighter than the background color and things, and it just looked a bit off. So always make sure that's very aligned. Something that bothers me a little bit about this shot is the shadows coming in from the right bottom here and from the left. Now, an easy thing to do, of course, would be to drag another dark gradient over it, which can make it look a bit cleaner, but it also can make your image look a bit too messed around with. For example, here I think it's already a bit too much, so I think I'll just leave it with one gradient. I don't know what you guys think. Thank you, Joren. But as you saw, it's actually quite easy. I mean, we took 2 photos, and we're actually only editing one now. This is the original one, which almost made me forget that we have a second exposure, being this one. What we're gonna do is I'm going to reselect the mask of that one. It's not really the mask, I cheated a little bit, but, and we're going to basically show that mask on our top exposure. So we're gonna do layer mask and reveal selection. And now we have our more detailed shot, which I will put into lighten mode back again, and on 35% for Stefan. There we go. And yeah, that kind of gives us a pretty nice result already. I can see there's a little bit of stuff here in the back. One thing about adding the fuzzy thing, because it's quite light now, and I typically, it's not the brightest color, so maybe it's not so bad when it's very light. Usually I drag down the opacity quite a bit because it's too much. Like if it's a red car and the fuzz is red, you need to tone it down. But one thing it does is it highlights in the background, and you can see here, I don't know what this is, sort of like a vent or a window or something. And because of that fuzzy thing, it really highlights it, which is annoying. So we're just gonna get rid of that real quick as well by again using the lasso tool. You can see my shoddy lasso work up close here, unfortunately, on the cars mask. So I've selected it here, and hopefully if I do content aware fill, it sort of gets rid of it. I usually copy the bottom part of the image and stretch it towards the side. That's a good tip, Rhino. Thanks. In terms of color, the fuzzy thing that we've used now is the same color as the car, pretty much, like at least the lighter part of the car. I really haven't done opposing colors much with that fuzzy thing. I think it works for some shots, but so far I've always preferred the color of the car itself. Now, if you slide around with your colors here, you can already see that it does work with some shades of green, I suppose. I guess it all depends on your personal preference. Yeah, I don't know what you guys think. I quite like this one. I'm not 100% convinced to add the details, the detail exposure. Yeah, I guess it is necessary. One downside of that top exposure, the one with the details, is it has that white stripe over the windows. Now, some people like that. I used to like it in the beginning, and then I sort of got tired of it. So what I usually do is I just select the entire part of the window. So not the outer rim, but just the glass part. Darren is listening to some terrible music in the meantime. Okay, let's get a bit closer. And this is pretty simple. We just select that part and we mask it out in that exposure where we have the stripe. So we basically replace the entire window column. It's so hard to see where the mirror is. I guess here, yeah. Okay, it's 10:10. I'm gonna have to hurry here. Boy, I really thought this webinar was gonna fly by in a second, but it sure didn't. Alright, so now we have the window selected. I'm gonna select the mask layer of that layer, and I'm just gonna fill it with black. So you replace it with the clean window that was underneath from this shot. Remove the reflection from the window. Yeah, that's okay. I guess that's before I did it. Vodko, yeah, I know the pen tool is better, but I hate it. Elmar, my Behance is behance.net/Rudolf van der Ven. I'm just gonna write that in the chat because it's a long and complicated name. There we go. Right, so there you have it. I'm kind of happy with this one. A few things that bug me are the bright reflections in the front spoiler. Yeah, they're not. This is a reflection. This is actually the white line on the car, and you can see because of my tripod that those light layers are definitely not well aligned. The clear telltales. But aside from that, I think you had a good look into my my workflow for a shot like this. So I'll save it. My color grading used to be pretty over the top, but I've like the last year or so I've tried to keep it simple. I'm just gonna make sure that it's a bit straight and in the middle as well. I usually take my pictures a bit further away. Reason I didn't this time is just so the car was not too far for you guys, so you could see what I was doing. But typically there's a few meters more. It's surprisingly hard to get the car centered. Fair enough, I guess. So color grading wise, I do typically knock up the vibrance a little bit. Contrast as well, but not too much, because you're already looking at a very dark picture, and by doing this you're almost going to a black and white silhouette, so I just And then in this case, I think the highlights are a bit too bright. Basically the reflection here on the shoulder and here on the roof. So I will try to take those down a little bit to make it less dramatic. I guess vibrance can go up a little bit as well. Something that I guess most people do is use a bit of color grading, so you alter the shadow colors or the midtones. I typically only mess with the shadows. This is a very hard color to mess around with. I think in the original shots, the darker blue hue gave it quite a nice sort of army look. I just noticed here that there's some ugly stripes on the floor as well, but yeah, those are typically easy to get rid of. So I think I'll stick with the blue shadow look like this. I think it gives a nice touch to the image. Do you stick to layered TIFFs or also save layered PSDs for safekeeping? No, always layered TIFFs. I don't actually know. Do you know what the advantage is over PSDs rather than layered TIFFs? Is it just compression or? And it wasn't an Aventador as Roadster, no. So this was the detail shot, which is a very different and a much easier workflow typically. I think the detail shots are more work in on the practical side to actually light it, because this was surprisingly smooth, but sometimes I can take 10 or 15 exposures just because I can't get the right feel for it. In the course, I've tried to go into detail as much as I can there, because there's a lot of factors to think of, like the counter lighting. What's really nice for detail shots as well is sort of blocking your light so that you have a partial shadow going over your detail. But it can be tough with, especially if you don't have a lot of experience with light painting. It really depends on things like if you keep your light horizontal or vertical, because if you hold it vertically next to your detail, you create a much sharper shadow if there's something behind it. So it's a whole science on its own. This one was rather easy, and in post-production you could probably just do all of this in Lightroom alone. If I'm knocking up the vibrance a little bit, I'm gonna do that correction thing for the lens. Yeah, I'm not sure anyone's gonna guess it either. No. So we'll do the same thing here. We'll do the bluish shadow tones. I almost never mess with the temperature actually. Like I said, I shoot in automatic white balance, but I tend to counter my colors purely with the color grading module. Almost never by making it colder or warmer, or using the tint slider either. I'm gonna push up the contrast a little bit. I'm just thinking if... At first I thought we were gonna have to use the sticker from the lighter exposure to highlight the sticker here in the darker one, but I don't actually think it's necessary. I do think it could be nice to rotate the image slightly to make it slightly more abstract, which also conveniently takes care of that white blob that was in the background. Unfortunately, something I didn't pay attention to in this shot is we do have quite a bit of reflection in the window from our light, but to be honest, it doesn't bother me that much. And this would be a good case where you could take a third exposure without light painting, maybe slightly longer exposure too. Thanks, Jarno. What I do like to do with these types of photos is add some gradients. I don't know why my gradient tool is absolutely messed up for the moment. And basically just dropping the exposure, for example, slightly towards the background to create a bit of focus on our subject, which in this case is the sticker mostly. There's a few, like, I do think it would look weird if we add some darkness in the top right. Typically, if you have a reflection from your light and you decrease the exposure, it's gonna look out of whack, as you can see here. Even if you remove your highlights, it just, your brain tells you like, this doesn't make sense. There used to be light there and now it's gone. So I tend to only mess with lower exposures in slightly dimmed areas already, which I think in this case works quite well. I don't know, do you guys have feedback on these shots? Any suggestions that we should do? I don't think we're gonna paint the light paint the yellow hurricane because yeah, we're running out of time, absolutely. So I will make sure to film that and put that up on the YouTube and send it to everyone who's attended the webinar. But it won't be for tonight, unfortunately. We will enjoy it, Rhino. We've had our pizza and we have our Coke, so we're happy. Let's see. So we did our side shot, our detail shot. I will send everyone the final pictures as well, just to see a bit more closely in a higher resolution. I guess this shot looks a lot like the one we took tonight. Stacking is what we did in Photoshop, basically adding layers on top of each other, which is a very easy technique once you wrap your head around it. And the post-processing we did as well. I guess I should have shown you the slides while we were working, but I was too caught up in Photoshop. And good, Darren is catching up on his emails. So I want to close with the course. Of course, the webinar was a sort of a sneak peek on what you could find in the course, albeit much more compressed and quicker, because of course it had to fit in. Well, my original plan was an hour and a half, but we're closing the 2-hour gap right now. So it's a very comprehensive course. It covers pretty much everything that I could remotely think of when it comes to light painting. Including a very big chapter on color science. I am going to show you quickly the curriculum for those who haven't seen it yet. So of course there's an intro on what to expect and how I got started, my story in a nutshell. In the second chapter, so the real first chapter, some explanation on why I love light painting, why it's so easy, why it's so flexible. And of course the things like you can accomplish great results with it that you typically can only do with professional studio setups, is at least my feeling. The gear I use, the gear you need, what I recommend for lights and all those things. Tripods, definitely not Manfrotto. Light painting techniques, basically what I said, holding it horizontally, vertically, the difference that it creates in shadow and light and all those things. Then that very big chapter about color science, how red works a lot better than blue, how silver can work great but still overblows very easily. You like bright colors, you really need to tone down your lights or cut down your exposure. Finding locations, which is quite a big one actually, because it's not as easy as you would think, and especially with regards to the underground, it can be quite tricky. And of course it needs to be very dark as well. And Baby Steps is a chapter dedicated to the footsteps that we saw earlier, how to avoid them if you can't avoid them. For example, if you can't somehow put your light on a stick with duct tape, how can you remove them in Photoshop, all those things. Chapter 3 is about the actual shoot, safety precautions. Obviously, once you're in shooting mode, you know, you're not really thinking about cars flying by and bringing other people in danger and yourself as well. So you need to really keep that in mind. Positioning and composition, very important. Obviously, the distance to where you put your camera in relation to the car, which positions you can use, 3/4 front, 3/4 rear, front, back, even top if you want. And yeah, camera settings, we've been over those as well. Calling the shots, which is basically listing the type of shots that we do for a more extensive shoot, not only 2 shots like we did today. Detail shots, like we also briefly saw today, which are very tricky, and interior shots as well. Interiors are relatively easy, but in some cars it's a bit tricky. Depends on the color. Also greatly depends on the size of the windshield somehow. But yeah, I'll get into more detail on that in the course. And the final chapter is the post-processing. So what we did tonight in a nutshell, but more extensive, with the added bonus of adding that studio environment that we quickly did today as well. And the final touch-ups, because obviously the images that we did, they still need some work to be picture perfect for say a campaign or whatever. So that's basically what's in the course. These are the files that are included. So you have a full transcript, the cheat sheets, like the one you already had for the webinar, the presentation slides, obviously, because they always come in handy, and then there's the group review section where every 2 weeks we discuss your results on the YouTube channel. So group review is free if you pre-order it tonight. I think it's a really cool thing. I've had reviews from professional photographers before, and I always thought it was great, not just because I thought they have more insight than me, which most of them do still, but they're just the fact that you have an unbiased opinion of your work is a very nice thing. So I really I think that's of great value. Like I said, the price drops 30 euros until midnight, which is still about an hour and 40 minutes. So you still have a bit of time to decide, not too much though. And of course the free group review also is not included after midnight. Sorry for the compressor. For those who have already pre-ordered before the webinar, because we had a short 24-hour pre-order period, and I think lots of you who are here already pre-ordered it back then, you also of course get the free group review included with your purchase. So the launch, I'm again sorry for the small delay there. I really did not expect work to blow up suddenly because of the COVID regulations being lessened in Belgium, but it did. So I did get a bit of a delay in there. I'm checking the comments to see if there's any more questions. And indeed, a huge thanks to Darren for helping out with the webinar and letting it happen here. It's pretty cool, and yeah, major thanks. He's not here right now, but I think he'll hear it. Thanks for the 2 visitors as well, who came all the way from Namur, not knowing that it was a webinar, but it's actually been fun to have them as a live audience. They haven't seen much of what was happening on the screen, but fortunately the webinar, the live stream will be saved on YouTube, so everyone will be able to see it afterwards. I do see a growing list of requests to reveal the car that's being hidden in the background. I don't think he's gonna do it. I think he's casually ignoring me now, so maybe we'll never know. But I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart, really. It was great having you all here. I was slightly nervous, and we were having some technical issues in the beginning, as you might have noticed. But in the end, everything went, I think, pretty okay. Oh, here he is.
No guys, sorry. We can't reveal the car for one big reason. The client hasn't seen the car yet. So
very valid reason.
yeah, I think so. Car is 700k more, so pretty sure the client wouldn't be happy to reveal the car before.
Maybe he's watching actually.
No, I don't think so. But yeah, definitely follow Lamborghini Brussels, Rudolf, and the rest on Instagram.
And Darren _MM.
Yeah, I'm just posting content on other cars than Lambo sometimes.
Yes, 2000.
Yes, S2000, great car. Anyway, just follow the Insta of Lambo and Rudolf, and you will see very soon what we're talking about. But I can definitely assure you that this car worth it. Definitely.
It is, absolutely.
So yeah, and it was a pleasure to be here and work so late. So my boss, if you see me tomorrow, I'm off.
Thanks, Darren, and thanks, guys. I'm going to figure out now how to end the live stream. which is something I hadn't practiced yet. See you guys soon.